What is going on, everybody? Welcome into one of my favorite times of the year, reacting to the NFL draft. Before we get started, if you're interested in the how and why behind why I do these draft grades videos, or if you're one of those people in here every year saying, this is stupid, draft grades don't matter, we don't know anything about these players until they step on an NFL field, well, I have my grading criteria and the reasoning behind why I like this exercise on the screen here if you want to pause and read, or go down to the description down below. While you're down there, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button. It is a free and easy thing that actually really does support my channel. I appreciate it in advance. But without further ado, let's get started today with the NFC South and the Atlanta Falcons, who shocked the entire world by taking Michael Penix with the 8th pick in the draft. Watching this live, obviously this was where a lot of the talk was on the first night of the draft, and I just couldn't even process everything because there was just so many things to think about with this pick. I did break this down in my first round draft grades video, and I am going to leave it as a C, though I kind of wanted to give it a C minus, but you know, I kind of do have a solid enough gut feeling that 2-3 years down the road, Michael Penix is actually going to be a pretty good quarterback for the Falcons, and I do understand them wanting that peace of mind. And, you know, he's got a great arm. He's got great receivers here. It's really not a bad spot for him to go and sit behind a Kirk Cousins, which I do believe in the draft and develop philosophy. So, again, there's aspects of this pick that I can sit here and defend. It's a little bit earlier than I would like to take Michael Penix. I do worry about some of the upside with him, even though I just praised him. I need to see more play extension from him. While he's really good at sensing pressure and getting rid of the ball, he doesn't really add too much to the existing structure of the offense in terms of play extension and tapping into that, you know, good 40 time and strong arm and ability to throw outside the pocket. It just, those types of plays from him are very few and far between. And when you're talking about the elite quarterbacks in the league, that's the type of stuff they're doing. So there's been a lot of like Jordan Love comps on the Michael Penix pick, which I loved the Jordan Love pick, but there were so many differences in terms of that specific comparison. And that's when we kind of shift to the negative sides of this. Number one, he's a 24-year-old prospect compared to Jordan Love, who's 21, which is obviously a lot different in terms of a guy that needs to sit and develop compared to Penix, that I do think could have been drafted to play right away. You're talking about picking the guy with the 8th pick instead of the 24th pick, where Green Bay kind of had him falling in the draft as a value a little bit. I did think Jordan Love showed a lot more upside in terms of the play extension and those things we talked about, the flashes of potential to be one of those high-end quarterbacks that I didn't necessarily see with Michael Penix. So there's big differences in the prospect, but then big differences in the sense of like, okay, Aaron Rodgers had been there forever. You're planning to phase him out, as opposed to here in Atlanta, you just recruited Kirk Cousins out of Minnesota and by all reports stabbed him in the back. He had no idea that Michael Penix was going to be in play, or any quarterback rather. And if I'm Kirk Cousins, it's like, man, I signed here thinking they were going to build around me. We were going to go for a championship. Now I've got I've got this 8th overall pick breathing down my neck all the time. Makes me wonder if Kirk might have chose a different route in free agency. So I think it's really doing Kirk dirty in that sense. I don't like the human aspect of that, but, you know, I really do see some pros and cons here, which means I'm a little bit higher on this draft pick than some, but to not help the defense when you just hired, you know, kind of a defensive head coach, which is in theory a shorter term kind of win now, quote unquote, type of hire. You've got the young offensive coordinator that you don't know how long he's going to be there if he's good. That's why defensive head coaches typically have a shorter ceiling over time. You don't even have to look outside of Atlanta for a big-time offensive coordinator that left in Kyle Shanahan after they went to the Super Bowl under Dan Quinn. But we've seen that around the league as well. So definitely a surprise pick. See the good things, definitely see the bad things, and we'll find out in like 3 years if this pick was going to be worth it at all for Atlanta. But Honestly, my biggest problem with the Falcons draft isn't the Michael Penix pick. It's what they did at the top of the second round to go get Ruka Rororo with the 35th pick in the draft. I hate this for the Falcons. They moved up 8 spots, giving up a third round pick that could have really been used to help the defense, and then reached on Ruka Rororo, who is a good player. That's the reason this is not an F. He belonged in the second round, but probably more late second, early third. But the reach in terms of not taking Jer'Jon Newton, who went, I think, the next pick, really questionable process for me. It's stay put, and if Rook doesn't fall to you, you can very well pivot to a Chris Jenkins, who's right in that cluster, went in the middle of the second round as well. For me, there were a cluster of players that they could have been patient here to give up that third round pick and then go up and take a guy that I think was too early for where they took him, and passing up on a true stud pass rusher like a Johnny Newton is just very, very questionable to me. And every single Falcons fan in the chat that I interacted with totally agreed with me. So I don't really expect a lot of pushback on that criticism. Now, I do feel like I owe Rook a little bit of analysis here himself. I don't like the process and all that, but, like I said, he's a solid player. I think of him as a very high floor. Like, the worst case scenario is he's a useful third defensive tackle that can give you a little bit of run defense, a little bit of pass rushing. He tested really well. I didn't necessarily see the freaky athleticism on tape, but wins with some quickness as a rusher. Most of his pass rush wins were a little bit more of that slow burn where he's, navigating his way left and right, finding his way to the quarterback. You don't really see a power rushing profile from him. And again, it's not like Johnny Newton where he's got these insane athletic tools on film where he's just working dudes with swim moves and spin moves and cross chops all day. 23-year-old prospect as well, so not fully expecting that to be likely to fully develop into the future. I'm not saying it can't happen, and if it does, maybe he is a better player than Jer'Jon Newton, and maybe Jer'Jon Newton has injury issues that keep him off the field, and I'm just looking like an idiot, but I really just I can't stand by this entire process by the Falcons. This is kind of the definition of why we do draft grades, because there's moves like this every year where we knew it at the time, and some people are scared to really lay into teams, and then we look back on it 2-3 years from now, and it's like, yeah, that was really stupid. Why did more people not completely obliterate the team for it? And it's like, Atlanta's front office with these first 2 picks, if I'm a Falcons fan, I have no confidence that this is a regime that is going to be putting this team on the right path when that is your process. Like, the Michael Penix thing is one thing. I think it was mishandled with Kirk. He was drafted a little bit earlier. It is what it is. But when your process is as flawed as it is for Ruka Rororo, it's just like, man, you're supposed to be running an NFL front office, and these are the types of moves you're making. It's just very concerning. Now, things do get better as they go. They take Braylon Trice out of Washington in the third round. I think was very good value. I really like Braylon Trice, probably a little more than consensus as well. I would have been fine with him at the back end of the second round. I just think he's a very high floor pass rusher. He's tough. He's got a variety of power moves that work for him. It's solid bull rush, a rip move. Not the fastest player, not the bendiest player, but he did have kind of a weird combine situation that I think caused him to fall into the third round, but it's something I'm not really worried about, where he got sick, he came in really, really light, and then put that weight back on for his pro day. So I do like that from Braylon Trice, that he's back up to like 260 pounds, because when he was down to like 248, it's like, that's not the player we see on film. He's got a lot more size and power than that. So I do like this pick, Falcons fans. Honestly, I can't say it saved the Falcons draft, but it definitely got things back on track. You get an impact player off the edge after if you're going to go Michael Penix with that 108 pick and not pick an edge rusher, getting Braylon Trice in the third round is a very nice pick to complement that. It's just the Rook Ororo thing is like, bro, come on. What are we doing here? If you slid Jer'Jon Newton in there instead, this draft looks a hell of a lot different. But then you get to day 3 of the draft. They did some nice stuff at the top of the day. They start off with Brandon Dorless at the top of the 4th round. Really nice value. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. Nice hybrid piece that's going to fit right into that defensive line. He's not going to be like a full-time starter, but I do think he's going to be a very useful kind of move piece for that D-line. I see some early down work as a 5-tech where he can defend the run. He can even be a matchup piece as an edge rusher where he can line up against lighter tackles if you get that type of matchup. I like that specifically, like, for example, in our division against a guy like Luke Gedeke for the Bucs right tackle, a lighter tackle, someone that Brandon Dorless has this crazy size to kind of take advantage of. So a matchup to keep an eye on there in that division, but definitely can slide inside. He's got quick feet and a swim move that's really challenging for guards to handle. He's just not really great to elite at any one thing, but I do think makes a ton of sense as a 4th round pick to just, get with a smart defensive coordinator like Raheem Morris, who's going to have a plan for him. Really kind of a great, useful 4th round pick there. After that, they take JT Bertrand, top of the 5th round. I like JT Bertrand. I was talking about him as one of my guys when I did the show with EJ Schneider before the draft. Reminds me a lot of Drew Tranquill out of Notre Dame. Moves really well in space. We didn't get testing numbers from him because he's coming off an injury, but I think he would have tested really well. Excellent blitzer, underrated cover skills, not the biggest guy to kind of thump between the tackles, and he kind of lacks elite standout traits, certainly, but I think he's a useful player as a backup and a special teamer right away, and if he over time developed into a starter in Atlanta behind some of those nice starters they have, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise to me at all. So I thought that was a nice pick. Then after that, Jace McClellan out of Alabama, I wanted to like him a lot more than I did. He's, an Alabama running back, but he did underwhelm me in terms of the vision and just, he's not a great athlete. He's a good athlete. He didn't have amazing shiftiness out in space, so I didn't really see it with him. Then they take Casey Washington. I didn't get to his tape. I did watch his teammate, and while I was watching him, Casey certainly didn't stand out in the process. But, I looked into him a little bit. He's got the size and the athletic testing worth betting on in the 6th round, so that's fine. And then they take Zion Logue in the 6th round. Not going to spend too much time on this. It's a late 6th round pick. It is what it is. But I didn't see a draftable prospect when I watched Zion Logue. You just expect so much more from a Georgia defensive tackle. But a guy with high pad level, no athletic tools or pass rush production. So not a good run defender, not a good pass rusher. I don't know that there was necessarily a bunch of names that I would have taken at defensive tackle, but I just wouldn't have drafted Zion Logue, especially in the 6th round. Felt like a little bit of a local bias on that one. So not a huge fan there, but not the end of the world. Overall, I got to go with a D+ for the Atlanta Falcons, which might be the worst draft grade we give out really throughout this series. I just really can't understand the vision with those top picks. And you got to remember they had an additional 3rd round pick that could have been another impact player, and they kind of burned it to move up for Ruka Row and then wasted, I don't want to say wasted that pick, but did waste the opportunity at like a real impact player at the top of the 2nd. And they got a fine player, but not someone I see with like crazy upside like a Johnny Newton. And then the Penix pick kind of is what it is. Like Dorless on day 3, but nothing overwhelming on the last day of the draft either. So yeah, I think a lot of Falcons fans share my sentiment with this one on the Falcons, and let's just hope next year's better, because I really like Terry Fontenot. I really like Raheem Morris, but this process is definitely a little questionable here. But then we've got the Carolina Panthers, who I think with this draft secured arguably the best offseason that any team in the National Football League had. I know all of the Bryce Young haters, all of the CJ Stroud truthers are already writing off Bryce Young. But anybody that watched their games last year knows it wasn't just Bryce. It was a complete master class disaster in terms of how not to support a young quarterback that you traded a boatload of picks and a star receiver for. You look at what they did this offseason, they converted assets from the defense towards the offense, both cap space and draft capital, and then made great moves in free agency with trades to address the offensive line, a short to intermediate threat, a separator like Deontay Johnson, and then the remaining issues in this draft, starting at the top with a deep threat in Xavier Legette. I love the trade up to go get him. I had pegged Legette as the perfect fit for the Panthers in a lot of my mock drafts for a variety of reasons. Number one, he's close to home. What's not to love about that? But as I mentioned, the deep threat for the Panthers. You spent the offseason getting him an O-line for pass protection, for better run blocking. You get a Deontay Johnson in there, who's one of the best short to intermediate separators for quick game and an easy read option for Bryce Young. But another big problem in Carolina last year was halfway through the year, Bryce Young kind of forgot about who he was at Alabama, where he had that headhunters mentality, where he had deep threats. A guy like Jamison Williams in his sophomore season at Alabama, he was a great, aggressive deep ball thrower, but in Carolina, he didn't have any options to be that guy. And still on that roster, unless Jonathan Mingo came through, which it certainly wasn't looking promising in year one, you didn't have that guy at all. So I pegged either Xavier Worthy or Xavier Legette to be one of those two guys. They come up a pick and get him. They secure that fifth-year option, which is extremely underrated for wide receivers at this point with how much they're getting paid and demanding trades and all that stuff. It gives you a ton of flexibility at the end of their rookie contract. But I thought that was a statement from Carolina to go up and do that. And then you get to day two, and I mean, how can you not be impressed by the new general manager, Dan Morgan, who myself and pretty much everybody else criticized David Tepper and the Panthers for staying internal with their hire after their front office, not just last year, but really for 4 or 5 years, has really been such a brutally bad front office in terms of the trades, the drafting, you name it. So for them to hire internally with Dan Morgan, there was criticism there, but I mean, you look at what he did this offseason, you start things off trading up for Xavier Legette, and then the way he kind of traded around and navigated this draft was really impressive. So they trade down for Jonathan Brooks. Well, they trade down and then trade back up, right? So it was like a double trade situation, but super underrated out of this draft is they got their second round pick back for next year. They were still going to be giving their second round pick to the Chicago Bears, believe it or not, from that Bryce Young trade. They weren't done paying for Bryce Young, but to move down with the Rams and get their second round pick, you're recouping some of that, which is amazing in its own right. And then I love the Jonathan Brooks pick. Now, I would have gone Trey Benson, but I also really liked Jonathan Brooks. So if there's any criticism there, that might be it. But I think you pair the trade down situation on top of that. I'm still willing to go with an A for that pick of Jonathan Brooks as a whole. But this continues the theme of just adding exactly what they were missing last year. They were missing pass protection, addressed it in free agency. They were missing short to intermediate separators, go get Deontay Johnson. They were missing a deep threat, they go get Xavier Legette. They were also missing a running game. They had tons of 2nd and 8s, 3rd and 10s. They could not get past the line of scrimmage because Miles Sanders couldn't see a hole at a Dunkin' Donuts. So you go and get Jonathan Brooks, who's got great vision. I compare him to Melvin Gordon minus the fumbles, which is a damn good football player. Super young, not a lot of tread on the tires. Coming off the ACL injuries, so you do still have Chuba Hubbard there on the last year of his deal, so you can kind of mix and match these guys and get through this rookie year with Jonathan Brooks. But I think heading into year 2 with Brooks, really going to hit the ground running, or even like through his rookie season, I think the more and more touches he gets, the more explosive he's going to be, and just carve out that role. So love that, helping out the run game. Then they think about the defense a little bit in the 3rd round. It was a little bit early for me for Trevin Wallace. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him, so you take him at the top of the 3rd. It's just a touch rich. I had him more like late 3rd, early 4th. Still a lot of good football players on the board. Also got to have a slight question about going with him over the local product and Peyton Wilson, but maybe they're worried about the injuries. Wallace is definitely going to give Panthers fans PTSDs, very similar to the Penn State linebacker, first name Brandon, can't remember the last name there, but they took him a little bit earlier than they probably should have. We had a commenter in the chat during the live stream that made a great point. It was like the former Panthers regime really didn't understand what they were getting with, I should really get this name right, Brandon Smith out of Penn State. Was drafted 4th round by the Panthers. But these types of linebackers, the freaky athleticism, the youth, it's going to all come down to coaching and patience, which they did not show with Brandon Smith. They cut him after 1 year. It's like, what did you think you were getting into? So just add it to the list of problems for the former regime. You're hoping that's different here. I kind of have the take that Trevin Wallace was arguably the worst football player I watched in this draft cycle. He has no idea how to play the position. He's just out there being an athlete, seeing the ball, running to the ball, completely reacting to everything, no anticipation, really no ability to get through his keys, get into the backfield quickly against the run. Just so much to work on. That's why, top 75 for him, it was like, it's just a little rich for my blood. But this is also what I always talk about, is draft athletes, 3rd, 4th round at the linebacker position, put veterans ahead of them, which they've done. They still have Shaq Thompson on the roster. They brought in Josie Jewell, who I like. So you're going to be able to show some patience, you would think, with a Trevin Wallace. And then I just want to slap the 7th round pick on top of that. They take another linebacker in the 7th round. I do like the process there. Just fast forwarding a little bit there. This is something we were also talking about in the stream, where it's like, if I'm building a linebacker room, I want 2 solid veterans that have flexible contracts, which the Panthers have. I want someone kind of in the farm system, so to speak, with crazy traits that you're hoping can hit someday. That's your Trevin Wallace. And then I need a cheap backup cheap backup. So like, no one's really interested in the traits or anything. You can get them late. You can pay them. You don't have to pay them a lot, but someone that understands the position. If Shaq or Josie Jewell go down for a week or two, someone that can step in and not have these gaping coverage busts or gap discipline busts where you're getting gashed out there. And that's Michael Barrett. So that definitely made sense in the 7th round as a rookie linebacker duo. Michael Barrett is undersized, has no upside at all, but very smart, was always around the ball for Michigan. So I like that as a process. But then we go to day 3, and God, they take Ja'Tavion Sanders in the 4th round. I have tweets that are talking about how the Panthers might want to target Ja'Tavion Sanders on day 2 of the draft. So to get him at the top of the 4th, the first pick in the 4th round, they're probably looking at the board overnight, kind of letting everything process, and they're like, what the hell? He's still there? So I think this is a great fit, man. I think he's going to compete for a starting role right away. It's such a natural receiving tight end. Just works back to the football, so quarterback friendly. He's got some of the best hands, and I don't put this lightly, some of the best hands you'll ever see for a college receiving prospect. Over 10-inch hands, no drops in his final season, wins contested catches. He's not the fastest tight end, and he's certainly not the best blocking tight end quite yet, though I do think they can get him to put on 5 pounds or so and at least survive in line, because he tries. It's just, Big 12 coaching. It's wherever you are, you're probably not getting the best coaching of how to block as a tight end. So I do think there's more potential in there. I actually saw a little bit of Sam Laporta in his evaluation, so we'll see how they handle it. He's got some stuff to work on. I want to see him polish up his routes as well. It's just kind of inconsistent, but he flashed a lot of good routes. Just a certified steal, in my opinion. Should have probably gone at the end of the 2nd or the early 3rd round. He ends up going all the way to the very first pick in the 4th round. Love that for the Carolina Panthers. And that wraps up your sort of offensive rebuild, right? You're after you take Xavier Legette, your last 2 remaining needs were running back and tight end, and they hit really good players in this draft. So I love that. Then we got a couple more picks to talk about. Not a whole lot to add. They get Chau Smith-Wade with the pick they got in the Trevin Wallace trade down. So I should have mentioned that with Trevin Wallace. If you were going to take him early, if they really wanted to have that player, I like that they moved down, got that 5th round pick, that they also got some secondary depth, a physical special teamer, someone that has a little bit of Troy Hill in his game, not the fastest corner, but a smart physical one. So, best case scenario can compete for a slot corner someday, maybe could surprise, but I didn't quite see that in him. I got to watch him at the Senior Bowl. I didn't put a final grade on him. He didn't quite make my 260 players that I wrote up, but I was familiar with them. Then they take Jaden Krumeti, who's a true developmental interior D-line piece. Not ready to play right away, but that's fine. You throw him in the room, see what you can get out of him in a couple years. And then we already kind of broke down the Michael Barrett pick. Did think that was a good pick. I wasn't sure if he was going to get drafted just off of the physicals, but I actually think this is an opportunity where he will be their backup linebacker out the gate, someone that will bust his ass on special teams for you as well. So for where they got him and how he kind of slots into their roster for the reasons we broke down, I think it is a good pick for them. And then I do want to mention UDFA steals. Why not? I didn't do that for the NFC North episode. If you're watching this from the NFC North, really the main shout outs would be the Vikings, who got both Dwight McGlothern and Gabriel Davis, who I had like kind of 4th to 5th round grades on, so thumbs up Vikings. But back to the Panthers here. One player stood out to me, Jalen Coker. We were actually talking about how there was some people like, why is Jalen Coker not getting drafted? I'm like, well, he's from Holy Cross. He ran a 4.57, so you can see why he would slip out of there. But I did very carefully say there's some shades of Adam Thielen there, the small school white receiver that just catches everything, incredible ball skills. But just, needs to work on his route running, not the best athlete. So to be in the room with Adam Thielen, someone to keep an eye on if he makes the team. Again, kind of a possession tight end, a possession receiver that could be a trust target for Bryce Young someday, maybe. So for the Panthers, I'm going with an A grade. I think they crushed not just this draft, but the offseason. And dare I say, the Panthers offense is going to be fun to watch. Maybe that's a stretch, but it's certainly going to be interesting, and for us to be saying that after what happened last year is going to be good news for any Panthers fan watching this video. Then we got the New Orleans Saints up next, another team that I think crushed it in this NFC South, a team that I think needed a big draft to kind of keep their hopes alive in this Derek Carr window, but there's a pick in there that potentially gives them an out to the Derek Carr window, which is going to be really exciting to talk about. But let's start in the first round. Talise Fuaga. I kind of stumbled over this pick because in my heart of hearts, I would have taken Mims. I would have taken Fatanu. I just like them better as pass protectors, which I think is more important for a Derek Carr. But at the end of the day, with the 14th pick, there is nothing wrong with Talise Fuaga, who's going to replace Ryan Ramczyk. Doesn't sound like he's going to be good to go this year or maybe ever again. So there's nothing wrong with him. I had a true first-round grade on him. He's just an incredible run blocker. I think he's going to be okay as a pass protector. I wanted to ding them for this a little bit, but it just doesn't really stack up. He's a really good prospect. A pick that is just a little too hard to argue with. So I am going to go A on there. And then they trade up for Kool-Aid McKinstry, just a pair of day 3 picks to jump up and get a corner that is just an ideal fit in New Orleans. I mean, you got Lattimore, you got Alontae Taylor, you've got Paulson and Debo. They've already got a really crowded room. I don't know how long Lattimore is destined for that team, just getting up there in age and getting expensive. So a potential out there. But the reason I really like this fit is both Taylor and Debo are super fast, and they love to run that. They love to kind of play matchup, bump and run coverage on the back end. And with Kool-Aid, really the only concern with him, number one was like zone feel. I like him much better as just a bump and run in your face corner. But the other thing is like, he just doesn't have great speed. So if he were to line up in a system where it's like, okay, you're just a left side corner, a team could come in with a Tyreek Hill or, whoever the speed threats are and get him one-on-one with Kool-Aid McKinstry, and that could be a problem. The Saints are really smart about it, and they have other speed corners, so they'll avoid those matchups as long as Dennis Allen is here. So I think he went to kind of the perfect spot to avoid any weaknesses in his game, and I can already picture him in that Saints jersey, just such a perfect scheme fit. So loved that pick for them. And then they didn't make a day 3 pick, but they totally make up for that fact. They didn't even make a 4th round pick, but they might as well have made a 3rd round pick because I thought Spencer Rattler was going to go in the 3rd round of the draft to a team like the New Orleans Saints, who has an older quarterback, might be looking for that out in a year or two. And what a dream spot, man. Comes in motivated as a 5th round pick. And I just, my analysis on Spencer Rattler is it's not that his tape was amazing. It was fine, but you were really encouraged by the improvements he made. It was kind of Bo Nixie in terms of, okay, he was at Oklahoma. He was this wild, just improvising scramble drill quarterback that just didn't have a pro style translation to the NFL. Goes to South Carolina, gets to play in the SEC against the best competition. Really didn't have a lot of help at South Carolina. Bad offensive line. He had Xavier Legette. That was great. But he didn't always have Xavier Legette. He broke out in the final year and didn't really have anybody else. So he's kind of out there trying to make things happen, but he's still, like, he so easily could have just reverted back to old Spencer Rattler, putting the team on his back. And there's still a little bit of that in him, but a lot of good structure play from him as well. So you like the development. And it's just not too often that you get to at least the third round, but especially the fifth round, where you're talking about a guy that was highly recruited, has a really good arm, is athletic, was once upon a time viewed as a potential number one overall pick. This is certainly the upside worth swinging on. Now, I'm going to give this a certified steal grade. I think that's totally justified. He might not work out. He might be a quote-unquote bust, but you can't really be a bust as a fifth-round pick. I think the risk is so worth the reward that this is definitely a certified steal. Then they take Bub Memes out of Pittsburgh. Big-bodied, kind of underdeveloped vertical threat. He'll be a special teamer while they kind of let him compete. I don't think there's really room for him right now. They've got a lot of good vertical threats in that room, in my opinion, and I think A.T. Perry's going to be above him as well. But there's a lot of physical tools in his game, so it's fine at the end of the fifth. They take Jalen Ford, who's a really high-floor, solid linebacker prospect. That's about the range I saw him going. I think it's fine. It's a crowded linebacker room, but he'll be a special teamer and a good backup if they have a run of injuries. Good zone feel for a bigger linebacker, but he's just, a lot of times his body just kind of betrays him. He's not that fast. He's got kind of tighter hips and stiff change of direction ability, but a sound player. Then I love the Christian Boyd pick as well in the sixth round. Once we got into the fifth round, how do you not take Christian Boyd? There's not a lot of just two-gapping potential nose tackles out there. There was probably 3 in this draft, but one of them just got a DUI 3 weeks ago, and one of them wasn't really a good football player. I thought Christian Boyd, at least, he's coming from a lower level of competition, but was really good at that level of competition. Just a bag of bricks that can two-gap and eat up space in the middle. If they want to run odd fronts, they can put him out there early. And you look at that depth chart, there's plenty of room for him to play as a rookie. So I love the opportunity for him. I think it's a great pick and an excellent value in the sixth round. And then they take a developmental tackle out of Eastern Kentucky, Josiah Ezerim. We'll see, kind of if he makes the team and where that development path goes. They also had a UDFA steal that I got to shout out, Dallin Holker. Definitely keep an eye on this player. Jawan Jennings has a really good role in this offense, right? Is that undersized move tight end. That is exactly who Dallin Holker is. I like Jawan Jennings. I don't think Dallin Holker is going to take his job anytime soon. But if he goes down, keep an eye on Dallin Holker to kind of get an opportunity, and he might be the kind of guy that never looks back. So ultimately, I'm going to go with an A grade for the New Orleans Saints. Really nothing I would have changed for them. Given that they didn't have third or fourth round picks, I think they did a very good job here. Needed tackle. You got one. Got a really good corner in the second round, which they always feel like they need corners just because of how they move these guys around. And, they'll go 4 defensive back formations, no problem. But honestly, one of my favorite parts of this draft is the potential out of Derek Carr. If he has a mediocre season and you like what you see from Spencer Rattler, he is the type of prospect that could be that day 3 pick with starting potential, giving you that maybe out on Derek Carr, depending on how he looks. All right, last team in the NFC South is actually the team that I think had the best draft in terms of steal and value, finding potential star players. I see a couple in this draft at values. Graham Barton, to me, getting him at 26 is actually a steal. I think he's a true first-round grade, a top 20 talent, and when he slips outside of those top 25 picks to get him at 26 without having to move, and he's a huge position of need for you as well, and he's totally their type in terms of these flexible guys that have played tackle. They just have that complete dickhead mentality on the field, so much like Ryan Jensen in his game, Ali Marpet. Thought Godicke had a little bit of that. Cody Mock, this is their type, and they found him at 26. I really think they might get a guy who's going to be one of the 3 to 5 best centers in the National Football League within his rookie contract. And, if we're going to give a pick, and with all due respect to Saints fans, I think Fuaga was good value, no criticisms of the pick. If we're going to give that an A, what is that S grade for if not to really celebrate the picks that I want to highlight as legit amazing picks? That to me was Graham Barton, one of my favorite picks in the first round. So that's going to get an S for me. And then Chris Braswell, end of the second. Okay, that all lines up. They needed an edge. For all the reasons we talked about, like Jared Verse in our mock drafts being a potential fit for them, that kind of linear north and south power rusher profile with good, not great athleticism, but maybe not the best bend and speed around the corner. That's going to be very similar with Chris Braswell, just to a lessened degree. I do think there's still room to kind of grow Chris Braswell's game. He's still relatively young. If he can develop some more counters in there, you might get a quality starter there at the end of the second round. Was totally cool with that pick. And I think his ability to push the pocket is something that Todd Bowles can tap into no matter how good you are, with all the blitzes and stunts he uses within that scheme. So I totally get that one, gave that one an A. But then to get Tyke Smith at the end of the third round. Now, I understand this is about where he was supposed to go, around that 100 spot, but I wasn't alone in the draft community among people that watched Tyke Smith and said, yeah, this guy's a top 50 player in the draft. Like, he is incredible. I thought he was the best slot corner in this draft, but like a guy like Antoine Winfield, who was my pro comp for him, by the way. They're now teammates, so you see exactly what they like in Tyke Smith. That was really on the nose. But also like Javon Holland, where these guys played a lot of slot corner in college, but you can project them and their skill set to play a lot more true safety stuff as well. And honestly, the other safety here, Jordan Whitehead, who they brought back after a stint with the Jets, that might be a really good high-low comp range with these Bucs players. I mean, just a really physical guy that, again, I think Jordan Whitehead was a slot corner at Pittsburgh, moved to safety, like same exact story. So makes so much sense here with the Bucs. I think he could start as their slot corner. I think he's a massive upgrade over anybody they have in that room. But some of the plays he made at Georgia after he kind of finally broke that lineup in his fifth year, you saw superstar potential. I really saw a lot of Antoine Winfield in his game. I wasn't shying back when I made that comp. So this to me is one of the steals of the draft. Someone I'm going to stick my neck out for against consensus a little bit. Excited to see how this one plays out. I've had some bigger takes on safeties over the years. I'm hoping this can kind of follow suit with that. Then they go Jalen McMillan, end of the third round. It's fine, a little bit rich, not horrible though. We're going to the B grade here, but you had a Troy Franklin on the board who's starting to slip, some other guys maybe. But I see what they like in him. I'm not going to be overly critical of this one, but I don't want to be too positive about it either. Definitely see a similar skill set to Chris Godwin, at least in terms of where and how he wins. Short to intermediate, a lot of crossing routes, throw him a screen, decent enough vertical speed to get lost over the top, and a really good run after catch threat. So, Chris Godwin definitely is not going to be around forever. He's had a lot of injuries, getting up there in age. So as a backup to him right now, and then maybe as a wide receiver 3 down the road and a potential Chris Godwin replacement makes sense. I think they liked what they got in Trey Palmer as their deep threat. So I understand, not wanting to replace him with Troy Franklin. So I do understand that. Definitely agreed with them going wide receiver. On the surface, it's not a big need, but you look down the road 2 or 3 years, definitely a position I wanted to see them invest in. But then day 3, they get Bucky Irving. He ends up going right where I kind of had him as a late 4th, early 5th round pick. So it's fine. He got a lot of hype from the draft community. A lot of people are going to think this is a major steal, and that's totally fair. Like, I see the highlight reel just as much as the next guy. His jump cut in space, his vision in space is really exciting. But the question is going to be, like, at his size, with a lack of athletic ability, really, is it really going to translate to the NFL level outside of the Pac-12? It's a legitimate question. I do believe that. I've seen some Kyren Williams comps. I didn't see the same level of vision that Kyren Williams had coming out of Notre Dame between the tackles. I like his vision out in space. I'm a little bit more jump happy to bounce runs outside than a guy like Kyren Williams. So I don't quite see that being that kind of outlier that threads the needle as this undersized back. Where I really like Bucky Irving, and this is where I don't actually love the fit for the Bucs, but where I really liked Bucky Irving is as a kind of scat back and a pass downs specialist, where he's got smooth hands, definitely more room to develop his route running and ability to contribute in that part of the game than Oregon tapped into from him. But you have one of the best receiving backs in the game in Rachaad White, so you're taking some of those touches away from him, giving them to Bucky Irving. It's just a little bit redundant. I would have rather seen them go with a Kamani Vidal, more of a bowling ball of needles, or maybe an Audric Estime, give you a little bit more size and legitimacy between the tackles. So I did think it was interesting. I'm definitely going to be a little bit lower on the Bucky Irving pick, and I recognize if his ability to make guys miss translates to the NFL and that athleticism that he lacks doesn't matter at the next level, I'm going to look wrong for this. So he is definitely a player that we'll know pretty quickly, kind of like we said with Kalijah Cansey on this team, where it's okay, he's got these weird outlier traits. You loved what you saw in film, but is that going to get to the league and still translate? There's nothing really to really criticize in terms of the technique or the skill. It's just, do the traits translate, if that makes sense? We'll know with Bucky Irving within his first couple months of is this guy going to be a good NFL player, or can he just not really do what he likes to do in the league? We'll see. But then you got Elijah Klein at the end of the 6th round. Didn't get to him. We were looking him up live on stream. He had the highest pass blocking grade in all of Pro Football Focus offensive linemen last year. So pretty hard to argue against drafting that at the end of the 6th round. Say whatever you want about PFF grades or his level of competition, but if you are literally the highest graded pass protector in all of college football, it's I would gamble on that at the end of the 6th round. We'll see what that turns into. And then they take the undersized tight end, Devin Culp, out of Washington. Yeah, he's all right. He's got some speed. I'm intrigued as a wing tight end in that system. I think it's fine enough. I would have preferred to go Dallin Holker and not let the Saints get him. But maybe with Culp, just untapped potential, being in that room with 3 other wide receivers, just took away his opportunity to shine. So I'm willing to give him a chance as a late 7th round pick. So ultimately, I'm going to go with an A grade for the Bucs, our 3rd A grade in this division. If I had to tier those within this division, I think I got to give the nod to the Bucs, just getting, in my opinion, a couple of real guys that I saw a lot of star power potential in the league, that I don't know if other draft grades are going to pinpoint Graham Barton and Tyke Smith as those guys. But I'm really drawn to these players. I think the Bucs are going to be extremely happy that they fell into their lap, and excited to look back on this in a couple years to see if those guys turn into the caliber players that I think they can be. And God, just imagine if Tyke Smith turns into another Antoine Winfield, and you've got 2 of those guys flying all over the field. One play there in the slot, one play there free safety, one play there strong safety. I wouldn't want to go against that Bucs defense. Absolutely not. But that is going to do it for the NFC South. Really good drafts by this division outside of maybe the Atlanta Falcons. I'm sorry, Falcons fans, but I think a lot of you agree with me. Certainly let me know in the comments down below, specifically Falcons fans, whether you agree or disagree. But all of you guys, let me know if you agree with what I'm seeing, if you think I'm crazy with these grades. Am I too high on Tyke Smith and Graham Barton? Just let me know in the comments down below. And please do hit that like button while you're down there on the way out. And we'll be up next. Let's do an AFC team next. Let's go to the AFC North next. We'll see you guys for that one. Thank you for watching. Peace out.